Hello, hello, hello. This is Scott Eustace, Healthy Golf for True Transition. On a little bit about how to identify platforms that are offshore but in state waters. This is our favorite Texas Petroleum Investment Corporation. This is on Sunrise. You could track this facility with coastal use permits, with oil spills, and now with methane leaks. But the methane people in Arizona and on the East Coast don't know how to access federal or state data. Federal people don't know how to access state data. There's barely any state people at all. So there's no consistent list of platforms that are clearly offshore. But sometimes the state will even call this south in the southern region. So it's all confused. There are as many definitions of offshore as there are agencies, so it's a problem. What we'd like to do is develop a list of platforms in state waters offshore. Offshore meaning you have to get a boat to service the facility. That's a very broad definition of offshore when we're talking about jobs and plugging methane leaks. It drives the cost up by 6 times according to LDNR Orphan Well Program. So, where are the places where it's going to cost 6 times as much to rent a boat? There's no consistent list like we have for BOEM in the state waters of Louisiana. And don't ask me about Texas. I don't even want to know right now. Okay. That's the scope. Let's share some resources. So this is part of a memo. There's not a single data set as mentioned, but we have state offshore blocks, which isn't where we have some key facilities that are orphaned and leaking methane in Vermilion Parish that are outside of these geographies. So that's frustrating. State waters is really what I would like, but I've got a UTM projection and my QGIS isn't participating with this or the active leases. That would be a good layer to have in a proper projection, because you could do something like idle iron for state resources, state platforms that are outside of active leases, which I think is a problem. I think with Conoco and other things in Lafourche Parish, as well as probably Vermilion. But I can't do the selections. But I would like to select by our wells, coastal permit points and lines, and probably I should add polygons to this post 2023. The Army Corps requiring GIS for wetlands permits. A lot of the CAD softwares from the applicants are going straight to GIS, which means DNR can just instantly add it to their polygon layer. And so permits post 2023, and you can kind of see it in the graphic behind me, are going to be polygons instead of points or lines. But going back, wells goes back to 1950s and before, but you kind of don't trust it before then. Points and lines go back to 1980. And once you get a target, you can do something like this using aerial photography in Sunrise. The other way to do it is to see who's leaking oil and who's leaking methane. I haven't included the methane list because it's very short. But the researchers at U of Arizona published that all of this is in the Gulf of Mexico. They published that this facility is in the Gulf of Mexico when it is not. It's in Breton Sound. Understandable if you're from Arizona, I guess. But we can also look at the National Response Center platform list and then geo limit it. Okay. The first idea is to create 3 letters based on the state offshore blocks. Like I said, it excludes Vermilion, you know, very offshore, but not considered offshore by the state. I think PHMSA would consider this offshore. Look. And so I think PHMSA's definition of offshore is probably the closest one to what I would want, because that's the one related to the cost of remediation and LDAR. Okay. So you can see the state waters layer in blue. You can see the active leases, and you can see the actual offshore blocks in green, and then points and lines. So let's look at that. In the GIS, we've got Louisiana state claim water bodies. We've got active leases and offshore blocks all activated. So, right. Then we want to look at coastal lines and points, which there's too many, and you can see the items that are in yellow have been highlighted for a selection. Export. Oh, and also I did polygons as well, but there's too many. It's just going to overload your system, but we can select by those offshore blocks and take a look at it. Oh, okay. Let's just look at the coastal permits points. So, you know, anytime you move in the waters, you have to file for a coastal use permit. And in the older days, you would just put a point. That was the easiest way for the department to track things. So here we have remove heater line platform. So there's a heater platform, you know, so you can get locations that are named platform. And you'll see that, you know, you're going to have this thing, heater platform and walkway serving state lease 21-1-22. It's outside of an active lease. It's obviously a platform. It's in our PHMSA definition of offshore, but it won't be in this selection right now, which is unfortunate. When I looked at the points, you know, you can get some of these locations, and these data should be pretty precise. You can see the clusters that, you know, maybe this point and this point are the same point, but most of these, platform B, tower removal, platform F, you know, some of these are the same point, but mostly they're not. Coastal use is going to be derived from the CAD drawings, so it's going to be a pretty precise location, more precise than the data set we'll talk about next. So, you know, of course, a lot of these have been removed. So, you know, hopefully you've got that in the coastal permits data, but this gives you more locations that are platforms. Now, you know, there's this selection was done by a keyword search. So we can show a bit of that. Once we did the coastal points and got that whole thing, we did a Excel search for the word platform, the word structure, well, and pipeline. Like probably it should have included facility, because we ended up with only 11,000. So, my computing power could go up. I should add more and more terms to this method. And then when we did a geofence, it knocked us back down to 1,293. So I could fit this on, if I put facility, if I put tank battery, if I put some other typical search terms for the common sense of platform, it still would be under 2,000. So considering expanding the geofence, so we get some of those platforms that are in Lafourche Parish and in Vermilion Parish, right? Castex. Another thing to look at is wells. I don't think I have the offshore wells selected yet. But you can see the well layer has its own classification of offshore, and it's pretty inconsistent. The department does not use this label at all well. So you can see how there's offshore wells mixed in with southern wells pretty thoroughly, especially in Breton Sound, where we just have a lot of problems. So it's pretty terrible on LDNR's part. Yeah, but I guess once I develop that list of targets, like 1,293, you can go in Sunrise and find platforms. Talking about wells in order to reject it for now. Talk about permits lines. You can see, we can find a platform by looking at the center of these spider webs, right? So hopefully I have a point there, even though we have a repair and removal point. Wish we had better points. You can see that these points are going to be more than just a well location. And well locations are going to be at the perimeter of these spider webs. But the hope is that these lines will then point you to the platforms. So that sucks that we have this here. There's obviously some kind of thing going on, but it's not showing up in the coastal permits data as a platform. What we could do is, it might be that a lot of this has been removed or abandoned in place. Fortunately, the lines layer has very little or no description. What you get is the year, but we have a 2020, 2003, 2022 pipeline. So, there's probably something at that location, but it's not being identified by the points layer, by any of the points layer. Let's see if the polygons gives us anything. Like I said, the polygons are going to be very, very very, very recent. Is going to tell us that there's some flow lines that were repaired here, Or this repair may not have happened, but it might have already happened. Um, so there's something at that location. What we can do though is, we can definitely use this. Follow up on the record. And get a plat that'll tell you what this is. So these lines for key operating company. Unfortunately, this hasn't named the platform, but there's um there is an existing platform at this location with no name. We can even get typicals for the existing platform. It just has no name. So that one is fun. Uh, um, the other thing to do is to go with a much more a looser data set that's often inaccurate, and that is the existing oil spills. So the permit data is a bit more restrictive. The oil spill data seems to have given us an NRC report from Unima Exploration at this location that we're interested in. So in 2020, there was a release of an unknown amount of crude oil at this location, and it was categorized as a platform incident. So Yuma Exploration may not operate the platform, but they were liable for the oil spill, and then we get a location, which is pretty good. It's enough that we can search for the image in Sunrise. I'll go through that pretty quick. So far, I'm getting thousands of returns from this type of search, but the low quality of the locations means that there's a lot of duplicates that and a lot of mistakes that need to be eliminated. So you can see how it casts a wider net than the but we're still missing some. But at least it's a wider net cast. And even this list is kind of limited. But let me show you some errors. This is the Mississippi Canyon spill from Taylor Energy. It's being reported as in Chandler Islands 9. So that's just totally incorrect and should not be in the data set. And I believe some of the ones from Whitney Oil and Gas, which is in it's in West Bay or East Bay, forgive me. See these Whitney Oil and Gas, you can tell the latitude direction is off. Same with Cox Operating. These are going to actually be down here or in the Gulf. So, this is a broader net to cast. It gives you an idea of how much is active and the operator, rather than a permittee, which is going to be more of a time lag. Like that Cox Operating is probably in the Gulf and not actually in the state waters. But it could even be wider. So I'm looking at casting the net wider for these NRC spills. So, here's the geography of the search, which is pretty big. Included a bunch of things. And so this limits our search in time. If we really wanted to get into a particular bay in Louisiana, I might zoom in, which is going to go further back in time. If we just focus on this part of Vermilion and St. Mary parishes, we get back to 2016 for the first 100. And when we go to download these locations, you see we max out. We don't, well, we exhaust the record. 318, it could show up to 20,000. In this case, for this wider geography, I maxed out at 20,000 at 2018. So we only have records going back to 2018, specifically July 2018 to present. That gives us 20,000 locations to start. It may not pick up inactive platforms. We want to see if it says platform or if the search says platform. Those 20,000 went to 3,525, and then when we geo limited it to the actual offshore waters, this green area. I can't show that in the GIS, but this map is the 3,525, and then geo limiting gives you the highlighted dots, which is only 300. And I think that's a little low. So we may look for different typologies, but these are all of the platform records that have the word platform in the narrative. Everything that was categorized or database as a platform also had platform in the narrative. You see that these numbers are the same. So the map that I showed is all of these. So some of these are fixed. Some of these are categorized as unknown sheen or pipelines, even storage tank. I'm considering we need to include storage tank and get this number up. And maybe even include unknown sheen. You can see there's a wide discrepancy between fixed and the number of oil spills categorized as fixed that were also verbally associated with a platform. There are vessel spills on their own and vessel spills associated with a vessel docked at a platform. All of these things widen your search, but I think my goal is to get to a number under 2,000, because I don't think there's more than 2,000 structures. So we can cast the net wide and then trim it back down. Adding storage tank, I've reviewed enough of these to say that all these storage tank spills are going to be within the common sense idea of the structure in waters. Right. So here's all the storage tank, and if platform is in the narrative, and so I'm going to whittle this down to give us some more of these points. So that's where I am. I'm in the middle of this. I guess the last thing is just how do we get, once we have our target location, going to have to create a data set that names what the platform is. So our first search pulled up that Yuma um that Yuma incident, which is at one of these locations where we thought that a structure might be very uh, likely to be. Um, and it was a Yuma location where we had no points. But regardless, we're going to get a bunch of locations from whatever search method we get, and we want to do a photo check. And that involves Sunrise, which we're going to use a lot of these same databases, but Sunrise gives us the background photo. There may be a way to do this in Quick Maps. Actually, yeah, maybe let's try Quick Maps. Have the Bing aerial. Okay. So let's look at this Lobo operation point. I have the Bing aerial selected, and yet nothing. Have a Bing aerial for this area. Oh, maybe Bing is not the right service to use. Okay. Instead, let's go to use Sunrise, because that in itself will tell you some things. You can say go to coordinate, and in 83, longitude and latitude are kind of reversed to what you're thinking. But again, you can check the oil and gas wells layer. We can look at points. I think we derive this though from the lines, right? And we might want to look at polygons because they're going to have the most up-to-date dredge and fill. So we've got a well that looks like an injection well. It's going to give us a number. We can look to see if it's a Yuma well. We can look to see if these pipelines are Yuma pipelines. We want to, oh, and I guess the most useful, and this tank batteries layer is less useful than you think. Okay, I'm coming. The thing we want to do is look at the photography and see, yeah, there's a platform here. There's a structure here connected to a current pipeline network and even a well. Thing is this a Yuma well? What are we going to name it? We can see that there's a couple of wells here. And we're reading the saltwater disposal well, which is active. See, we have key operating is the company, and quickly on the well details their last report is in 2002. So is it an active injection well? I guess so. It's listed as active by the department at least. So key operating at this position would be one candidate. The other thing is to look at the most modern pipeline. And I think, yeah, oh, we looked at this, didn't we? Okay. Who's digging in the ground is key operating. So I definitely would put key operating. This is a key operating platform. It's just a shame that they haven't named the platform. You know, it'd be nice to have a platform name. This is test repair for a flow line. It is in Oyster Bottoms. So, you know, who built this platform? We don't know. But one thing that would be good to do for the pilot is we have the location listed, say key operating existing platform, and has the markers by which we identified the name. It has the two wells, it has the pipeline permit. And oh, the other good thing to do would be to put in the Louisiana offshore blocks layer. Right. So it's in main pass 004. So, you know, main pass 4. Key operating, main pass 4, existing platform P20221062. So, you know, that way we have a name. That's the most up-to-date company. We're going to have contact information for that company if something's going wrong at this thing. We've got the shape of the platform. And, you know, in our diagram, we'll have the location. And, you know, it would be good to have pictures on file for any aerial surveys. You know, from this, I would just make, I don't know where I'm going from here. You know, it seems like I'm on the path to make 500 pictures and then my own database, you know, with an operator name, a block name, or state waters name, and then a coastal use or well or NRC report name, you know. Imagine a spreadsheet with all of those things with about 500 records in it, I'm thinking. And, you know, each of those ideally would be associated with a photograph like this. And then we can figure it out. Another source of data I didn't talk about is the NOAA ORR oil spill data, but I haven't really thought about that. You can see I'm in the middle of all of this. So, you know, if you have a specific location, you know, that is, and you just need the name of things, we could just do the last part of this and sit down in the database with 20, it's a 20-minute search, right? Um, but if we want the full data set for planning purposes, we have to do scoping. We have to scope from at least 3 or 4 different directions. Actually, the NOAA ORR database is going to be a subset of the NRC database. So 3 directions for searches, and from there, we can go through the locations and make these photos and create a new CSV kind of data set that could be a definitive list. All right. Be well. Have a good weekend.